All right, so you want to really get a grip on the FCC, huh? Especially with everything going on these days, right? And you're not alone. It's a bit of a head spinner, honestly, but super interesting once you dive in.
Absolutely. And timely, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a deep dive today. We're talking their mission, how it all works, and some of the big policy stuff they're wrestling with. And get this, our guidebook for today. A chapter straight out of Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise, lays out a pretty bold vision for the FCC's future from, well, you guessed it, a conservative point of view.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating read. Doesn't pull any punches, gets right to the heart of where they think the FCC should be headed, makes you think about what we're seeing play out in the news right now and all.
For sure, for sure. So, okay, let's break this down a bit. For those of us who don't have FCC acronyms memorized, what is the FCC in the simplest terms?
Can you imagine, like, the rule book for how we communicate? Like, everything, radio, TV, that blazing fast internet, you love it all, falls under the FCC.
So hold on. They're not just deciding what you can't say on the radio. They're also part of why I can binge watch, like, anything I want online.
Yep. Think about it. Anything crossing state lines, going international, that's their domain. Financial stuff, global news, even just chatting with family overseas, all relies on what the FCC regulates.
Wow, okay, never thought of it like that. But who are these people, really, the ones calling the shots?
So at the top, you've got 5 commissioners appointed by the president. He's got to get the okay from the Senate, all that. Here's the kicker, though. No more than 3 can be from the same political party. Keeps things balanced, right?
Ah, so it's like built-in checks and balances, but specifically for, like, the airwaves and the internet and such.
Exactly. And these aren't just like small decisions. We're talking billions of dollars, policies that shape how we connect with each other, do business, everything.
Speaking of billions, who's footing the bill for all this?
Well, we are, in part, taxpayers, right? But it's not just us. Their budget's about $390 million, give or take, and a chunk of that comes from fees on the companies they oversee. And then there are those spectrum auctions you might have heard about. Those bring in billions more.
Okay, spectrum auctions, now you're just using big words to sound smart.
It's cooler than it sounds, I promise. So spectrum is like the invisible highway your data travels on. Phone calls, internet, all that. The FCC, they're directing traffic, deciding who gets to use which lanes and how fast they can go.
So it's not just about keeping things organized, it's big business too. That's kind of wild. But let's bring it back down to earth for a sec. How is the FCC structured? What's actually going on in there?
Think of it like a well-oiled machine. That's the goal, at least. They've got different bureaus, each with its own focus. Media Bureau, that's your TV, radio stuff. Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, pretty self-explanatory. You've got wireline competition, all sorts.
Gotcha. So like a team, each with their specialty, trying to work together. Makes sense. But let's be real. It's not always smooth sailing, is it? What are some of the, like, hot button issues they're dealing with right now?
Oh, man, where do we even start? Big tech regulation's a huge one, obviously. National security concerns. And then there's how the FCC can actually help the economy grow or not.
Yeah, you really put your finger on it there. Those are some real hot button issues. Let's start with big tech, actually. You ever wonder how the FCC factors into all that debate around companies like Google and Facebook?
Right, like everyone's got an opinion on how to keep those guys in line, don't they? What's the FCC's role there?
This is where that Mandate for Leadership chapter gets super interesting. They're really pushing for the FCC to step up and use their muscle, especially when it comes to something called Section 230. It's part of the Communications Act, which, the FCC oversees.
Section 230, honestly, sounds a little dry. What's the big deal with it? More exciting than it sounds, trust me. Basically, Section 230 protects online platforms from lawsuits over what users post. So, someone's ranting about you on Twitter. You can't sue Twitter for it,
Okay, so it's like a liability shield for those companies. Gotcha.
Yeah.
But why would the FCC want to reinterpret that, like our source material suggests?
Well, the argument is this immunity, this broad interpretation the courts have given it, it's gone too far. Our source is saying it lets these platforms off the hook for harmful content or even biased stuff. They want the FCC to narrow that interpretation.
So instead of a free-for-all, these companies would have to really keep an eye on what they allow on their sites. Doesn't that get into censorship territory, though?
Exactly. That's the whole debate. Critics, even some conservatives, worry about the government getting too involved, right? Stifling free speech. Companies should be able to set their own rules, they'd say.
It's a tough one, balancing free speech with, dealing with the bad stuff.
Trying to define what bad stuff even is without silencing people unfairly. That's a tough one for sure. No easy answers there. And the source material doesn't stop at Section 230. They want more transparency from these big tech companies, too. Like, what are their content moderation policies? What are those algorithms actually doing? Make it make sense, you know?
So no more black boxes. We get to see how the sausage gets made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears a bit, national security, big focus for the FCC, according to our source material.
National security, that's high stakes. What's the FCC got to do with all that?
Well, think about it. All the networks, the infrastructure that connects us. Our source, coming from that conservative perspective, is worried about those networks being vulnerable, especially to, well, to be blunt, threats from China.
It's like we've got our physical borders and our digital borders both got to be secure.
Exactly. And they're particularly worried about companies like Huawei, even apps like TikTok, those ties to the Chinese government, potential for data being accessed. It's a real anxiety, you know.
So it's not just what information is out there, it's who might be getting their hands on it.
Exactly. And the FCC has already taken some action. They barred companies like Huawei from getting those federal subsidies we were talking about, revoked licenses from some Chinese telecom companies, too. They even made this covered list, basically, companies and technologies they see as security risks.
A blacklist for the digital age, huh?
Pretty much. And our source material wants the FCC to get even more aggressive. Update that list faster. Be really clear about which companies doing business here might have ties to, unfriendly governments.
Stay one step ahead. Gotcha. But with all this talk about threats and security and all, it's easy to forget the FCC also has a role in something, well, more positive, like economic growth.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really, really fast. True to its conservative roots, our source material is all about letting the free market work its magic. Less regulation from the FCC, more competition, that's the name of the game. And they're particularly focused on something called spectrum allocation. Might sound a little technical, but it has a huge impact on your everyday life.
Spectrum allocation. Okay, you're losing me a little bit.
Remember that invisible highway for your data? Well, the FCC is directing traffic on that highway, deciding who gets to use which lanes and how fast they can go.
Okay, so if I'm following you, they're saying if the FCC kind of like redrew the map of that spectrum highway, we could actually boost the economy. How does that work exactly?
You got it. The idea is freeing up more spectrum, especially for 5G faster internet, more companies competing to bring you the best service. Everybody wins, right?
Faster internet, I'm listening. But like realistically, there are still tons of people who can barely get online at all, right? Does this actually help with that whole digital divide thing?
You're hitting on a really important point. Yeah, the source material, they recognize that not everyone has good internet access. It's a big deal. And they point to, well, all the money the government's spending right now on broadband infrastructure, billions of dollars, right? It makes you wonder, are we using it right?
That's like, yeah, we're building a bridge, but is it going to be strong enough for everyone to use? Are we even building it in the right place?
Exactly. And our source, they're focused on the FCC, but it makes you think about that bigger picture. Do we even have a national strategy for this stuff? Or are we just throwing money at the problem?
Which kind of brings us back to accountability, right? With that much power, that much money at stake, how do we make sure the FCC is actually answerable to us?
That's the question, isn't it? And our source material wants more transparency from the FCC, especially when it comes to spending on broadband. Are we getting the most out of every dollar? Is it actually reaching the people who need it most? Good questions.
Right. So it's not just about what they DO, it's about why they're doing it and whether it's the right thing to do in the first place, which I think brings us to the elephant in the room we've been dancing around this whole time. With technology changing so fast, can any agency, even the SEC, really keep up? Can they actually regulate the internet of the future?
$1 million question, right. And what's interesting is, our source has its viewpoint, a conservative one for sure, but it points to something bigger than that. How much should the government be involved in something as wild and constantly changing as the internet? Where's the line between letting people innovate and, protecting everyday people? It's messy. No easy answers.
Really makes you think about what's next,
Yeah.
And what role we all want to play in shaping this digital world. It's not just on the SEC, it's on all of us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of the FCC for today. We've covered a lot, from their mission to the big policy battles they're facing, all through the lens of this Mandate for Leadership chapter. It really gets the wheels turning.
Just scratch the surface, really.
Exactly. Always more to learn, more to uncover. But hey, Hopefully this gives you a good starting point, right? Some food for thought. So keep asking those tough questions, my friend. Keep digging. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one shaping the future of the internet. Until next time, stay curious.